If you think you know what really happened during Harry Potter's first year, you don't. Hidden deep in the dungeons of Hogwarts, buried under layers of enchantments, Snape cast himself. A secret diary has surfaced, filled with the thoughts he never intended anyone to read. From the moment Harry Potter stepped into the Great Hall, Snape felt the castle shift, the wards tremble, and something ancient, something hungry, stirring behind Professor Quirrell's eye. Every late-night patrol, every near breach of the stone's protections. Every moment he silently stood between the students and a threat they didn't even know existed. It's all written down. The unicorn blood wasn't the first warning, and it definitely wasn't the last. This is Snape's truth of year one, not the hero's tale, the spies. If you want the full diary, every entry, every secret, every shadow, drop a like before you fall asleep. Because once you enter Snape's mind, you won't want to close your eyes. September 1st, 1991. The castle stirred long before the students arrived, its stones humming with the same restless energy I felt in my own nerves. Another year tethered to a post I did not choose, yet one I cannot abandon. Dumbledore met with the staff this morning, his manner characteristically serene while delivering instructions that were anything but ordinary. Increased patrols, reinforced wards, and the insistence that we treat this term with heightened vigilance. He refuses to state the reason outright, but it does not take a master of subtlety to recognize that something valuable and dangerous is being hidden within these walls. The train's roster confirmed what I had been dreading. Harry Potter would cross the threshold tonight, the son of my greatest enemy, wearing my greatest regret in his eyes. I have seen enough portraits of James Potter sneering down at me from Gryffindor tower to anticipate the bitterness that would churn in my classroom. But the boy is only 11. He knows nothing. It is the memory of his father that irritates me, not the child himself. Still, I cannot ignore the unease that coils within me at the thought of meeting him. He may resemble James, but he carries something else, something older, deeper, and no doubt tied to that night a decade ago. Whether he understands it or not, danger follows him like a shadow. For the sake of the castle, and for reasons I will not admit aloud, I must keep watch. Classes begin tomorrow, and with them the charade of normalcy. I expect very little from this year, except frustration, vigilance, and problems delivered courtesy of Gryffindor House. In that sense, at least, nothing has changed. September 2nd, 1991. The Great Hall was its usual spectacle tonight. Floating candles, nervous first years, and far too much noise. I've endured this ritual for over a decade, yet somehow it grated on me more sharply this year. Perhaps because I spent the entire feast anticipating one moment, and it arrived sooner than expected. When Potter looked toward the staff table, his gaze locked onto mine with a force I did not anticipate. For an instant, a pulse of magic flickered between us, faint but unmistakable, not accidental, not normal. It felt like the echo of something ancient brushing past my consciousness. The boy flinched, and I looked away first, irritated more by the sensation than the child. His sorting was predictable. Gryffindor. The hat scarcely touched his head before declaring it. James would have been proud. I, decidedly, am not. What unsettles me more is Quirrell. The man has always been timid, but tonight his behavior bordered on unnatural. Sweat pooled at his collar. His stammer fractured even simple greetings. and the faint shimmer of dark magic clung to him like smoke. I attempted to catch his eye, but he avoided my gaze with the desperation of someone guarding far more than nerves. Dumbledore, of course, sat beaming with infuriating calm, as though nothing at all about tonight's proceedings were amiss. His cheerfulness is often a mask. Tonight it felt more like a warning. The year has barely begun, and already the castle feels restless. Students whispering, professors watching one another, wards tightening in subtle pulses that only those versed in magic can sense. Something is shifting beneath the surface. Potter's arrival may not be the cause, but it certainly coincides with it. September 7th, 1991. The first full week has concluded, and already the familiar irritations of teaching have returned with renewed force. Today's first-year potions lesson served as an immediate reminder of why I avoid optimism. Potter entered the dungeon surrounded by Weasley and Granger, his self-appointed entourage it seems. He carries himself with a strange mix of uncertainty and expectations, as though he cannot decide whether he deserves special attention or wishes to avoid it. The boy's fame precedes him with every step. The class watched him more than their cauldrons, which is exactly why a simple boil cure nearly became an explosion. His actual skill, neither impressive nor disastrous. Average, decidedly so. The irony, of course, is that he appears genuinely surprised when he is not praised. Perhaps life outside the wizarding world has not filled his head with the accolades wizards heap upon his name. A small mercy. Weasley remains predictably inept. I have seen garden gnomes with better ingredient handling. Granger, however, is the embodiment of unrestrained diligence. Frustrating, but undeniably competent. Her eagerness borders on obsessions. Still, she may yet become the only respectable brewer in that trio. Outside the classroom, the students continue their tiresome attempts to access the third-floor corridor. I have turned away to groups already. The headmaster's warnings only entice them further. Children, especially Gryffindors, are drawn to danger as moths to flame. As for Quirrell, his inconsistencies are becoming more pronounced. His magic flickers like an unsteady lantern, sometimes present, sometimes disturbingly faint. Whatever burdens him grows heavier by the day. This term will not be easy, but then ease has never been my privilege. September 14th, 1991. The castle has begun to show clear signs that this will be a particularly difficult year. A fact I recognized even before the students arrived, but one that has now been confirmed with irritating frequency. I have spent the last several evenings patrolling the upper corridors, and every night the atmosphere feels more strained, as though the very stones are bracing for impact. The third-floor corridor remains the primary concern, regardless of Dumbledore's warning at the feast, and perhaps because of it. Students continue to treat it as some sort of riddle meant to be solved. Word travels quickly among children, and all it takes is one brave or foolish Gryffindor to inspire an entire pack of imitators. Twice this week I intercepted groups lingering too close, whispering about something hidden. If only they realized how catastrophically unprepared they are for what lies beyond that door. My irritation is not merely with the students. Some of my colleagues seem content to treat the matter with too much lightness. They believe Dumbledore's enchantments and the protective measures each of us contributed are unassailable. Their confidence is naive. Any defense can be unraveled by a determined intelligence, and I am increasingly certain that such an intelligence is lurking within this castle. The matter of Quirrell grows more troubling daily. His behavior is no longer simply nervous. It is fractured, inconsistent, unstable. When I passed him in the hallway yesterday, he recoiled as though struck. His turban smelled faintly of iron and decay, an odor that does not belong in any civilized environment. When I confronted him about his absence from the Thursday meeting, he muttered a series of excuses so disjointed that even the most gullible first year would have seen through them. More telling was the residue of magic clinging to the walls near the entrance of the restricted corridor. Not powerful enough to be dangerous on its own, but recent, hours old. Someone has been testing the protections. Someone who is either extraordinarily foolish or intimately aware that the stone lies beneath those enchantments. The thought is not comforting. This brings me, inevitably, to Potter and his cohort. This afternoon, I discovered them lingering near the charms corridor, too close to the forbidden area for my liking. They attempted to appear innocent, Potter with his wide-eyed confusion, Weasley with his transparent lies, Granger with her rigid posture and guilt-ridden silence. I deducted points accordingly, though the punishment was hardly about the infraction. It was about discouraging curiosity. Yet the boy's expression lingered with me long after. There is something in his manner, an instinct, perhaps, or a pull toward danger, that reminds me uncomfortably of Lily. She had the same talent for walking willingly into peril if she believed it was the right thing to do. Potter lacks her intellect and restraint, but the impulse is there, unmistakable. The castle is bracing for something. I feel it in the wards, in the hallways, in the very magic that flows through this place. If the students continue circling the third-floor corridor, and if Quirrell's condition worsens, it will only be a matter of time before speculation becomes discovery, and discovery becomes catastrophe. I will increase my patrols. If the headmaster wishes to maintain his enigmatic calm, so be it. I do not share his optimism. Someone is moving against us, and I intend to know who. September 20th, 1991. Tonight's staff meeting accomplished precisely nothing, despite lasting far longer than any gathering of these people reasonably should. I arrived prepared with questions, logical, necessary ones, but Dumbledore's answers were the usual cryptic nonsense masked by whimsical smiles. Sprout fretted about unauthorized greenhouse visits. Flitwick made a gentle request for improved corridor discipline, and Hoach complained about broom maintenance, all while the most pressing matter of the year went largely unspoken. The stone, always referred to vaguely, always avoided the moment the conversation draws too close. Dumbledore insists that all is well, but the headmaster's reassurances have historically meant the opposite. The protections we set in place are formidable, yes, but formidable does not mean impenetrable. Whoever is testing the restrictions understands magic well enough to probe without triggering catastrophic alarms. That alone is reason enough for concern. Quirrell's behavior was, once again, the singular anomaly in the room. The man trembled so violently during the discussion that his teacup rattled on its saucer. When Dumbledore mentioned additional security considerations, Quirrell nearly choked on his drink. I caught the quick flicker of panic in his eyes before he hid behind that absurd turban. I attempted to question him afterward. He avoided me with the reflexes of a frightened animal, mumbling excuses and clutching his books as if they were a shield. I do not frighten easily, but the degree of fear he exhibits is disproportionate. It is not fear of me. It is fear of being discovered. On my way back to the dungeons, I inspected the magical residue left near the third-floor corridor. What remained of it, at least. Someone cast a disillusionment charm there recently, crude and uneven, but functional enough to blend into the shadows without attracting the attention of average students. This was no child's work. This was deliberate reconnaissance. Students continue spreading rumors, of course. Gryffindors half-whisper stories of secret chambers and deadly creatures. Ravenclaws invent elaborate theories involving monsters or enchanted artifacts. They are irritating, but harmless. Children poking at mysteries they lack the skill to unravel. What troubles me is the quiet hum in the wards, an unease, a tightening, as if the castle itself feels watched. Hogwarts has moods. Anyone attuned to magic knows this. Tonight, it felt alert, watchful, and tense. Potter remains oblivious. The boy seems to believe he is simply adjusting to school life, blissfully unaware of the machinery turning around him, in some cases because of him. His classwork is unremarkable, his conduct reckless, and yet there is something about his presence this year that acts as a catalyst. Things move when he is near, as though his arrival set dormant pieces into motion. The year's still young, but the signs are already gathering into patterns I do not like. If the headmaster refuses to share what he knows, then I will have to uncover the truth myself. Someone is probing our defenses, and I intend to find them before they strike. October 4th, 1991. Another fortnight has passed, and the students' fascination with the third-floor corridor has only intensified. I had hoped Dumbledore's theatrics at the opening feast would dissuade them. Instead, it has acted as a beacon, luring them, like nifflers, to glitter. Gryffindors, naturally, are the worst offenders. Bravery without intelligence is indistinguishable from stupidity. This afternoon, I intercepted yet another group. Third years, this time, lingering far too close to the forbidden door. Their story was predictable. They were looking for a shortcut, a blatant lie. I removed 5 points each and sent them on their way, though the punishment will not cure their curiosity. For many of them, losing points only strengthens their resolve, as though they are protagonists in some heroic tale. They have no idea what they are flirting with. And then, of course, there are Potter and his friends. I spotted the trio earlier in the week, loitering just outside the charms corridor, whispering urgently. They dispersed the moment they noticed me. Weasley cannot hide guilt to save his life. Granger pretends to maintain composure, but wears transparency like a badge. Potter, however, watches quietly, calculating, confused, yet compelled. He studies everything as though pieces of an unseen puzzle lie scattered before him. He has Lily's habit of seeking answers. Unfortunately, he also has James's talent for finding trouble. What concerns me more, however, is the shift in the castle's defensive magic. The wards surrounding the stone have begun reacting with a kind of static tension, the magical equivalent of a held breath. This evening, I detected fresh traces of someone attempting to test the enchantments from the outermost layer. The probing was cautious, almost elegant, not the work of a child, not the work of someone unfamiliar with advanced magic. The signature was faint, too faint to draw a definitive conclusion, but it had the unmistakable rhythm of someone with formal training. Someone who knows how to conceal their trail. Which brings me, inevitably, to Quirrell. I encountered him in the corridor tonight, his turban askew, his eyes darting as though he expected shadows to reach out and grab him. When I greeted him, he jumped as though struck by lightning. He muttered something about a misplaced book and fled in the opposite direction. The odor around him, metallic, cold, and wrong, has grown stronger. No simple curse produces that kind of residue. The man is unraveling, and whatever he is hiding is pressing against him with increasing force. The staff remain either oblivious or willfully blind. They move about their routines, unaware that the protections they helped build are being tested systematically. Dumbledore, of course, says nothing. He maintains that we must trust each other and trust the enchantments. Trust is a luxury I do not possess. Tonight I walked the length of the restricted corridor 3 times. Each pass left me more convinced that we are being watched, studied, measured. Whoever wants the stone is patient and intelligent. But patience has limits, and when they make their next move, I need to be ready. This school, these children, even Potter, none of them understand what approach is, but I do. October 31st, 1991. Halloween at Hogwarts is always a noisy, garish affair. But tonight the castle erupted into something far beyond the usual chaos. What began as an evening I intended to spend monitoring the upper floors quickly devolved into a sequence of events that left the entire staff shaken, and confirmed several suspicions I have harbored since term began. The alarm sounded just as the feast was underway. A troll in the dungeons. The announcement sent the students into panic, and while the staff attempted to restore order, I slipped out to investigate. There was, of course, no troll in the dungeons. Whoever released it did so with a very specific purpose, to distract us. And the most likely target was nowhere near the dungeons at all. The 3rd floor corridor. I moved there immediately. The castle felt wrong. The usual magical hum was warped, like a cello string pulled too tight. As I descended the staircases, the wards around the stone pulsed in warning, subtle but unmistakable. Someone was taking advantage of the confusion. On the 2nd floor landing, I encountered a series of faint, magical disturbances, footfalls masked by a concealment charm, the lingering scent of a defensive spell discharged in haste. The tracers were fresh. And then I found the worst of it. Evidence that someone had attempted to interfere with the first protective enchantment. Not successfully, thank Merlin. But the attempt was skilled enough to leave a jagged disruption in the ward structure. Repairing it cost me time and blood. A misaligned counter-hex slashed across my leg, shallow but aggravating, and forced me to move with more caution than speed. All signs pointed to Quirrell again. By the time I reached the corridor itself, it was deserted. Whatever happened occurred minutes before I arrived. Fluffy was unsettled, snarling, claws dug into stone, and his agitation confirmed that someone had come far too close to bypassing him. I steadied the creature, re-inspected the chamber, and found exactly what I expected. Traces of Quirrell's magic, poorly concealed and destabilized by fear. He grows more erratic each day, and tonight the cracks in his composure split wide enough to expose something darker beneath. His alibi, once the staff reconvened, was absurd. He claimed he fled from the troll upon sight, but he was nowhere near the location where the troll actually appeared. His nerves were frayed, his breathing uneven, his magic stuttering like a failing wand. And yet, as always, Dumbledore accepted his explanation with that infuriating, quiet calm. I cannot decide whether the headmaster is coddling the man or observing him with a patience I do not possess. Then there is the matter of Potter. Once the students were accounted for, word reached us that Potter, Weasley, and Granger had ventured into danger again and survived. They managed to defeat the troll. The details vary depending on the narrator, but their presence in such close proximity to catastrophe is becoming a pattern. Potter's name suffices wherever chaos brews. Coincidence is not something I readily accept. My leg aches. I have restructured the compromised ward and added an additional diagnostic charm of my own. I will not allow another breach attempt to go unnoticed. Tonight confirmed what I feared. Someone is willing to risk a troll in Hogwarts to reach the stone. And I am more certain than ever that Quirrell is not acting alone. November 5th, 1991. Several days have passed since the troll incident, yet the castle still feels rattled. Students whisper in every corridor, retelling exaggerated tales of heroism and near-death encounters. If I hear one more child declare that Potter single-handedly saved the day, I may assign cauldron scrubbing for an entire month. The truth, as usual, is less flattering and more concerning. I have spent much of this week investigating the remnants of magic left near Fluffy's chamber. The breach attempt was more serious than the staff realized. The protective enchantments, particularly the sensory wards, were tampered with in a way that suggests hesitation, as though the caster was fighting themselves or being compelled. Quirrell is the obvious suspect, but the inconsistencies in the spellwork troubled me. It felt like two styles tangled into one. One clumsy, frantic, the other measured, ancient, and unnervingly cold. Whatever is influencing him is exerting greater pressure. The man looks worse by the day. His complexion is grayish, his stammer fragmented into unnatural pauses, and his eyes dart wildly whenever anyone addresses him directly. When I passed him in the corridor yesterday, his magic flared, instinctive, defensive, sharp, the kind of response one shows when they believe they are being hunted. He fears exposure more than consequences. And then there is Potter and his insufferable companions. Their involvement with the troll changed something between them. They move with a newfound confidence, as though that one foolish stunt granted them license to explore every forbidden inch of this castle. 3 times this week I found them near restricted floors. On one occasion, Potter spotted me before I saw them, and the expression on his face, alert, evaluative, was not the look of a child caught misbehaving. It was the look of someone searching for patterns. He is noticing more than he should. That is dangerous. Granger, at least, understands rules. But her loyalty to Potter now trumps her natural caution. She watches him closely and mimics his curiosity. Weasley remains as transparent as ever, a poor liar, but a loyal follower. Their attention is drifting back toward the 3rd floor corridor. I can see it in the way they glance down forbidden hallways, and how they huddled together whispering after classes. Children sense stories. They sense secrets. Unfortunately, they also have a remarkable ability to find danger, even when every adult in the castle shouts them away from it. Dumbledore's behavior has shifted as well. He patrols more often, though he disguises it as leisurely wandering. He hums to himself, speaks to portraits, and acts the part of the harmless old wizard. But the wards strengthen whenever he passes, as though responding to his concern. He knows something he will not tell the rest of us. I am growing tired of half-truths and evasions. The castle feels like a chessboard in motion, pieces sliding slowly into place, students unknowingly crossing paths with threats beyond their comprehension, and beneath it all, the unmistakable scrape of dark magic, restless and hungry. The troll was not the climax of the danger. It was merely the opening move. November 17th, Entry 9. The Quidditch match and the curse on the broom. 2 days' events have left me more unsettled than I care to admit. One does not expect a Quidditch match, of all things, to become a battleground for dark magic, but that is precisely what happened. The morning began ordinarily enough. Gryffindor's first match of the season always sends the students into a frenzy, and this year's excitement was amplified tenfold by the fact that Potter, an 11-year-old, had somehow secured a place as Seeker. McGonagall, to my constant bafflement, insists the boy shows natural talent. Perhaps, but placing a first year in such a position is reckless. Yet even I could not have anticipated the danger that awaited him. It began midway through the match. Something in the air, an undercurrent of magic that prickled at the edges of my senses. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then Potter's broom jerked sharply to the side, almost throwing him off. A second jolt followed, far too violent to be explained by wind or inexperience. And then the broom began bucking, twisting with a force no enchanted object should exhibit unless tampered with. A curse. A strong one. I scanned the stands immediately. Hexing a broom mid-flight requires direct line of sight and sustained focus. And I found exactly what I expected. Quirrell. He stood rigid, eyes fixed unblinkingly on Potter, lips moving almost imperceptibly. His posture was wrong, too steady, too anchored for a man who shakes during casual conversation. Spellwork rippled off him in thin, controlled strands, nearly invisible but unmistakably dark. I acted at once. I fixed my gaze on Potter's broom and began countering the curse silently. It is delicate work. One must mirror the rhythm of the malicious spell without revealing the counter-incantation to bystanders. Maintaining focus was difficult with spectators shrieking around me, and with the looming fear that the curse might overpower me before I could undo it. Potter dangled from the broom at one point, clinging by his hands, legs flailing. For a moment, cold panic shot through me. If the boy fell from that height, but the counter-curse finally took hold. The broom stabilized, and minutes later, Potter dove and caught the snitch by accident, naturally. But the result was the same. Gryffindor erupted into cheers while I remained seated, heart still beating with the remnants of adrenaline and fury. The boy thinks I meant him harm. I saw his expression when our eyes met afterward. Accusation, mistrust. And of course, his friends reinforce his ignorance. They saw me casting a counter-curse, but lacked the magical education to distinguish one spell from another. To them, all wand movements looked the same. Let them believe it. Better they fear me than suspect the truth. That Quirrell, the seemingly harmless, bumbling professor, attempted murder in broad daylight. What concerns me most is how refined the curse was. Quirrell's own abilities do not fully account for the precision. Something was guiding him, enhancing him. Something strong, something old, something hungry. The stone is in greater danger than ever, and Potter, unfortunately, is tied to its fate in ways he does not yet understand. November 25th, 1991. The aftermath of the Quidditch match has lingered far longer than the cheers in the stands. Students chatter endlessly about Potter's daring dive, oblivious to the fact that the boy nearly lost his life. Half the castle treats it as an amusing anecdote. The other half has wrapped the child in mythic glory. Meanwhile, the truth that dark magic nearly killed him goes unrecognized by all except a handful of adults. I have revisited the pitch twice since that day, sensing for lingering traces of the enchantment Quirrell cast. The residue remains faint but detectable. Thin threads of parasitic magic, the kind that seeps rather than strikes. It was not a hex born solely of human malice. It carried the rhythm of something older, magic sharpened by intent far beyond Quirrell's natural capacity. The man is cracking. I encountered him in the corridor earlier today. His fear was palpable before he even saw me. The moment he realized I was approaching, he stiffened, eyes widening, hands twitching toward his turban. His pulse thrashed in the air like a trapped creature's. When I confronted him, calmly, directly, giving him every opportunity to explain, he stuttered out a half-formed excuse about checking the classrooms, and fled so quickly he nearly tripped over his robes. He is not merely nervous, he is terrified. And whatever terrifies him is not me. I brought these concerns to Dumbledore this evening. Predictably, he offered the same infuriating blend of benevolence and secrecy. He thanked me for my vigilance, assured me that matters are well in hand, and suggested that I trust in the defenses we have built together. Trust is not a strategy, and the defenses are being tested repeatedly. The wards surrounding the stone have fluctuated twice this week. Brief, precise disruptions that resemble reconnaissance rather than attack. Someone is mapping the protections, learning their patterns, waiting. There is no clumsy probing now, no tentative mistakes. The attempts are growing cleaner, quieter, more confident. And the signs point to one suspect. Quirrell is not working alone. Of that I am now certain. His magical presence flickers between two states, feeble cowardice and something unnervingly controlled. When the stronger presence surfaces, his stammer fades, his posture straightens, and the air around him thickens with hostile intent, possession, influence, a parasitic form of connection. I cannot confirm any single theory, but the symptoms align with magic far beyond a nervous professor's abilities. Potter, unfortunately, remains entangled in this mess. The boy's curiosity grows each day. He watches me in class more intently now, not with respect, but with suspicion. He has decided I am his enemy. Let him. His mistrust keeps him predictable, and predictable students are easier to protect without their knowledge. What troubles me most is this. The castle feels as though it is bracing itself. The corridors hold their breath. The wards tremble with anticipation, not fear. Something is moving closer, and when it finally acts, it will not be subtle. I must be ready. December 12th, 1991. The approach of winter usually brings a certain stillness to Hogwarts' cool air. Quieter corridors, students preoccupied with exams and holiday plans. But this year, the stillness feels wrong. It is not peaceful. It is expectant. The castle's magic has taken on a taut, crystalline quality, like ice that might crack under the slightest pressure. The disturbances around the stone have grown more frequent. I inspected the ward layers this morning and found fresh traces of spellwork, not forceful enough to break through, but disturbingly precise. Whoever is probing our defenses knows exactly where to strike. They are not guessing anymore. They are studying. The strange pattern I first detected weeks ago has become unmistakable. Every breach attempt corresponds to evenings when Quirrell isolates himself. Whenever he disappears for an extended period, the wards quiver. And whenever the wards settle again, he reappears looking depleted, grey, and visibly shaken. The man is not just afraid, he is deteriorating. I confronted him again after lunch. His hands jerked violently as I questioned him, his stammer tripping over every syllable. At one point he froze entirely, as though listening to someone who was not me, someone who was not even present. His eyes clouded over for a heartbeat, glazed and distant, before snapping back with a jolt. A divided consciousness, external influence, possibly possession. Whatever grips him is gaining strength. Meanwhile, the students remain blissfully unaware of the dangers surrounding them. Gryffindors in particular treat the third-floor corridor as a puzzle left by a mischievous ancestor. 3 second years attempted to access it yesterday. They fled when they saw me, tripping over one another in their haste. I deducted points regardless. And then there is Potter. He grows more restless with each passing week. His curiosity has sharpened into intent. I caught him wandering near the library's restricted section 2 nights ago. He offered no believable excuse, though I did not press the matter. The less he thinks I suspect, the more predictable his movements remain. Still, his pattern of rule-breaking follows an uncomfortable logic. He is not seeking mischief, he is seeking answers. Answers he has no right to, and no capacity to protect himself from. Even so, I cannot help noticing that the castle seems to shift around him. Rooms open, secrets breathe, magic stirs. It is as though the very foundations of Hogwarts react to his presence. Whether this is coincidence or something more, I am not yet prepared to conclude. Dumbledore continues to assure us that we are safe, which is precisely the kind of optimism that precedes disaster. He has been more present in the corridors recently, humming to himself, exchanging pleasantries, drifting through shadows like a man who knows something the rest of us do not. Christmas approaches. Students will leave soon, and the castle will quiet. Part of me is relieved, part of me is wary. Whoever is hunting the stone may see the holiday as an opportunity. Silence invites action, and I fear the next breach will be far bolder than the last. December 25th, 1991. The castle is nearly silent today. Most of the students have returned home for the holidays, leaving the halls hollow and echoing. On any other year, I might welcome the quiet. Solitude suits me. This season, so steeped in sentimentality, rarely brings comfort. But the stillness this year is uneasy, shaped not by rest but by waiting. Potter, of course, remained at Hogwarts. I had assumed the boy would join his peers in fleeing for the holidays. But it seems that Dursleys had no desire to host him longer than necessary. Predictable. There is a particular tension in the air when Potter is near. It is as though the castle shifts its weight subtly, bracing for his inevitable proximity to trouble. This morning, however, brought a development more concerning than his presence. Potter received a cloak. Not just any cloak, that cloak. An invisibility cloak woven with enchantments I have only seen once in my life. Long ago, when James Potter strutted through these halls, believing himself untouchable. The resemblance is unmistakable. The weave smooth as moonlight, the magical signature ancient and resilient, a relic of immense power, and one that should not be in the hands of an 11-year-old boy. Dumbledore knows it is here. He must have been the one to return it to the child. But why? Why would he equip Potter with an artifact capable of bypassing nearly every conventional barrier in this castle, especially now, when the stone is under threat? Was it protection? A test? A manipulation? With Dumbledore, it is impossible to distinguish strategy from sentiment. I spent part of this afternoon reinforcing the wards near the third-floor corridor. The holiday lull has not slowed the probing attempts. In fact, the most recent disturbance was last night, subtle, barely detectable, but fresh. Someone is testing the defenses when the castle sleeps, a cautious predator. I am almost certain the next attempt will not be a test. As for Quirrell, he was absent for most of the day. When I finally encountered him before supper, he looked skeletal, eyes sunken, skin pale. Magic sputtering around him like a failing candle. His aura flickered between fear and something far colder, and for a heartbeat I sensed a presence behind his gaze that did not belong to him. He avoided me entirely, muttering a flimsy excuse about grading papers. His lies grow weaker as the darkness around him strengthens. And then there is Potter's increasing curiosity, though he believes himself unnoticed. I saw the lingering traces of his footsteps near the halls that lead toward the restricted section last night. The cloak grants him invisibility, not silence, not subtlety. He will continue to wander, to search, to meddle. He has become a variable I cannot control. Christmas should be a day of respite, but instead it feels like the calm before a storm. Every thread in this castle is tightening. Potter's movements, Quirrell's unraveling mind, the steady pulse of the wards, Dumbledore's cryptic watchfulness. Something is coming, and when it arrives, I fear the boy will be at the center of it. Cloak or no cloak. January 5th, 1992. The students return today, in waves of noise and disarray, tracking snow through the corridors and chattering loudly about their holidays. The castle feels heavier now that it is full again, its magic shifting back into the familiar rhythm of lessons, mischief, and adolescent chaos. Yet beneath that surface hum lies something taut and unsettled, as though the walls have not forgotten the disturbances of the past months. Potter, unsurprisingly, resumed his pattern of nocturnal wandering almost immediately. Last night, well past curfew, I detected the faint distortion in the air that accompanies the presence of an invisibility cloak. That cloak. He was near the upper floors, steps too deliberate to be the aimless drifting of a bored child. I followed the trail until it vanished near the library's restricted section. Though I did not catch him directly, the evidence was unmistakable. Faint imprints in the dust, the lingering whisper of magical displacement. The boy is searching for something, and he believes, incorrectly, that no one is watching him. I did not confront him, not yet. The less he knows of my awareness, the easier it will be to predict his movements. But this level of curiosity is dangerous. Potter does not understand what he is edging toward. The protections surrounding the stone reacted again this morning. A brief tremor rippled through the ward layers, precise, controlled. as though someone was testing a single point repeatedly to gauge its limits. The frequency of these disruptions has increased. The pattern is too deliberate to be coincidence. Someone is preparing for a full attempt, and Quirrell. He is unraveling faster than I anticipated. When I encountered him in the antechamber before dinner, he flinched violently at the sound of my footsteps. His eyes were restless, pupils dilated, hands trembling. But then, for the briefest moment, his expression cleared, his posture straightened, the stammer disappeared, his gaze sharpened with a cold, calculating awareness that has no place on that man's face. Then, as quickly as it surfaced, the moment passed. He buckled inward again, clutching his turban and muttering apology. It was as though two minds were warring behind his eyes. If my suspicions are correct, the weaker one is losing. The staff, as always, seems oblivious. They treat Quirrell's condition as anxiety, treat Potter's curiosity as harmless enthusiasm, and treat the castle's changing atmosphere as winter gloom. They fail to notice the signs right in front of them. Or perhaps they choose not to. Dumbledore remains deliberately unreadable. I attempted once more to raise my concerns privately, but he dismissed them with gentle assurances and maddening optimism. His trust in the natural course of things borders on reckless. If he will not act, I must. The next breach attempt will not be a test. It will be an opening move. The pieces are shifting into place. Potter's wandering, Quirrell's collapse, the trembling wards, the cloak, a perfect storm forming in slow, silent increments. I will increase my patrols tonight. Something tells me the castle will not sleep easily in the weeks to come. January 18th, 1992. Tonight has confirmed what I have suspected for weeks. The castle is drawing Potter closer to danger, and the boy is far too willing to follow its pull. My patrol began as it always does, quiet circuits through dimly lit hallways, checking for magical disturbances, listening for shifts in the ward's resonance. But within minutes, I sensed something amiss. The magical trace of the invisibility cloak again. Thin, silvery distortions in the air that only a trained eye would notice. This time, the trail led not toward the library or the common rooms, but toward the third-floor corridor. Potter was not alone. Though invisible, he moved with measured steps, careful pauses, and whispered breaths that even the cloaking enchantment could not fully hide. His companions, Weasley and Granger, were nearby as well, attempting subtlety with considerably less success. Their whispers carried, their footsteps echoed. They are intelligent children, but they are still children. The closer they crept to Fluffy's chamber, the more agitated the wards became. The protective enchantments do not simply repel intruders. They react, they tighten, they vibrate like disturbed strings. Tonight, those vibrations were sharp enough that even a novice might have sensed them. Why were the trio there? Curiosity, yes, but there was something more purposeful in Potter's movements, as though he believed himself on the cusp of an answer. He paused near the final stairwell for several seconds. I could practically feel him thinking. I allowed them to approach only so far before intervening. I stepped into the corridor and cast a quiet, revealing charm. Nothing overt, nothing they would recognize. Just enough to force a change in the magical pressure around them. The cloak did the rest. Its enchantment rippled in response, and I caught the faintest shimmer of their outlines, as they froze in place. Potter held his breath. Granger clutched his sleeve. Weasley knocked into a suit of armor and only narrowly avoided sending it crashing to the floor. I did not address them directly. Instead, I spoke to the empty corridor, stern, measured, and unmistakably clear. Anyone wandering this floor will face consequences far beyond point deductions. The warning was aimed at the intruder I knew was not their Quirrell, but it served its purpose for the trio as well. They retreated, scrambling silently back down the staircase, the cloak fluttering faintly behind them. When they were gone, I inspected the outermost layer of the protective spells, and once again I found evidence of tampering. Not the children's work, something far more deliberate. A spell had brushed the ward barrier earlier in the evening. A light testing touch, like a fingertip tapping glass to see if it cracks. This testing is becoming more frequent. Whoever is doing it is learning the tempo of our defenses. Quirrell remains my prime suspect, but the pattern of his deterioration continues to disturb me. Tonight he skipped dinner altogether. His absence went mostly unnoticed by the staff, but I felt it in the wards. The castle's tension thinned for the duration of his disappearance, only to tighten again the moment he resurfaced later, slipping through a side corridor with a haunted look in his eye. Two magics pulse around him, one frightened, one predatory. The frightened one is losing. As for Potter and his companions, their involvement is no longer confined to curiosity. They suspect something, maybe not the stone specifically, but something significant. They're following clues they barely understand, clues that keep leading them directly into the jaws of danger. It is becoming increasingly clear that the boy's presence here is not incidental. He attracts turmoil as naturally as a lightning rod draws a storm. And storms, when they gather, do not disperse quietly. February 2nd, 1992. The castle has settled into its midwinter routine, students trudging through snow, teachers drowning in marking, and the occasional first year accidentally freezing their own cauldron. Outwardly, it appears ordinary. Inwardly, the strain on the magical infrastructure grows heavier by the day. The wards surrounding the stone have trembled 3 times this week. The disturbances are brief, mere seconds, but precise. Too precise. Someone is no longer merely testing the protections. They are measuring them, mapping their fluctuations, probing for weak points with the patience of a master strategist. This level of calculation does not belong to a panicked, stuttering man, which is why Quirrell's condition stands in stark contrast to the sophistication of these attempts. I confronted him today in the corridor outside the Great Hall. He froze the moment he saw me, truly froze, as though his body could not decide whether to flee or collapse. When I moved closer, his magic recoiled violently, rippling around him like a startled creature. "Are you unwell?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Fine, he choked out, his voice cracking in ways that suggested not nerves, but torment. Then it happened again, that momentary shift. His posture straightened, his shoulders squared. The stammer vanished. Just for an instant, his eyes met mine with a force that did not belong to Quirrell at all. Cold, calculating, ancient. It was not the gaze of a fearful man. It was the gaze of something evaluating me. Then, as always, the moment shattered. He flinched, murmured an apology, and scurried away. gripping the edge of his turban with trembling fingers. This is no simple psychological unraveling. Two forces inhabit that man, one shrinking, one strengthening, and the stronger presence is learning. The staff remain willfully oblivious. Minerva has grown more suspicious of student behavior but less attentive to the magical disturbances. Flitwick continues to trust in his charm work, and Sprout has been preoccupied with a fungus outbreak in Greenhouse 3. Even Hoach seems convinced the only threat this term is student broom mishandling. Their ignorance is dangerous, but perhaps their normalcy provides the illusion of safety Dumbledore believes necessary. As for Potter, he continues his nocturnal wandering, though he has become more cautious. I have not detected the cloak in over a week, which means either he has grown more skilled or he is saving his wanderings for moments he believes truly significant. Knowing Potter, both are possible. P.U. watch us, Quirrell now. I have noticed him glancing toward the man in lessons and hallways, confusion creasing his brow. He senses something amiss, but cannot identify the source. I must admit, his instinct for danger borders on unsettling. Still, he lacks context. He has fragments, nothing more, and fragments can be just enough to lure a child directly toward the heart of the threat. Tonight, before patrol, I checked the outermost layer of the stone's protections again. The ward responded to my presence with its usual pulse, but beneath it I felt another vibration, faint, rhythmic, like breathing. Magic does not breathe, but possession does. Quirrell is losing himself, and whatever is taking his place is growing bolder. The storm is no longer approaching. It is already here, gathering strength behind the eyes of a man too frightened to fight it. The castle grows restless. There are nights when I walk its corridors and feel the walls themselves listening, holding their breath, waiting for something to come creeping through the dark. The torches flicker at odd intervals. The portraits watch with unusual intensity, and the wards hum with an undercurrent I have heard only once before in my lifetime. It is the sound of magic anticipating conflict. Quirrell's condition deteriorates with disturbing speed. 1 hour he trembles like a leaf, stammering apologies to shadows. The next, he moves with a firmness at odds with every part of his nature. In those moments, something cold lurks behind his eyes. Something ancient, something patient. I have seen that kind of patience before. Potter wanders more boldly now, cloak or no cloak. He follows threads of danger he does not fully comprehend. Threads that weave themselves tighter around him with each passing night. Whether he knows it or not, he is already entangled in something far beyond childhood curiosity. The stone's defenses pulsed with every disturbance, reacting like a heartbeat quickening under threat. Even the higher layers, the ones no student should ever approach, have begun resonating faintly, as though bracing for an intrusion. And I cannot shake the sense that the next breach will not be a quiet one. Something moves beyond our sight, something hungry, something returning. When the storm finally breaks, I suspect the castle will remember the night forever, and Potter will, inevitably, be standing in its center. February 26th, 1992. Tonight has confirmed the reality I have been circling for months. The threat within these walls is no longer creeping at the edges. It has stepped into the open, bold, hungry, and desperate enough to spill blood beyond the castle grounds. The warning reached me not through the staff, but through the wards. A sudden spike in dark magic, sharp as a scream, cold as winter steel, pulled me from my patrol and sent me straight to the outer boundaries of the forest. Moments later, Hagrid came barreling toward the castle, shouting about a wounded unicorn. A unicorn. Creatures so pure in magic that only the vilest of beings would dare harm them, let alone feed on them. Their blood is a final resort, a curse for those who drink it, a sentence worse than death. And yet someone did. I reached the glade before the others. Even now, the memory stings like frostbite, the torn underbrush, the silver blood glimmering on leaves like spilled moonlight, the air heavy with the residue of parasitic magic, a kind that latches, drains, clings, a kind I have not sensed since the darkest days of my youth. At first, the scene was eerily silent. Then I felt it, an oppressive pressure along the tree line, as if something unseen had fled only moments before. Its departure left the magic warped, trembling, as though the forest itself recoiled from what had trespassed there. And Potter, of course, Potter was out there. Before I arrived, he and that bumbling Weasley boy had been sent into the forest with Hagrid's oafish excuse for a punishment. Absurd, dangerous, typical of this year. When I heard they were still inside, my pulse seized with an irritation bordering on genuine panic. That the boy continues to stumble into danger is infuriating enough. That others keep allowing it is beyond negligence. By the time I followed deeper the sense of the creature. No, the presence had moved on, slithering between trees with deliberate intent. What remains of Quirrell's magical signature reeked in the air, but overlapped with it was something stronger, something ancient. A second layer of magic pressed over the first, like a hand over a puppet's strings. Two magics moving as one. The weaker is shattering. Potter survived the encounter. Barely Hagrid found him pale, shaken, insisting he saw a hooded figure drinking unicorn blood. If it had turned on him fully, but it didn't. It fled. Why? Something stopped it, or someone, I reminded Hagrid, far more sternly than he appreciated. That sending children into the forest at night is a reckless absurdity that cannot continue. But the man is too simple-minded to understand nuances of magical predation. As I returned to the castle, the wards vibrated with a sensation I have not felt since the fall of the Dark Lord. Recognition. As though something once banished had brushed against their edges and left them quivering in memory. Dumbledore, naturally, is looking into it. His calm is a performance I am rapidly tiring of. The truth is undeniable now. Someone is attacking unicorns to sustain themselves. Someone who should not be alive. Someone bound, parasitically, to Quirrell. And if they are strong enough to feed, then they are strong enough to strike. The next move will not be subtle. March 10th, 1992. The unicorn attack has left a mark on the staff, though few understand the magnitude of what it signifies. Whispers circulate in the faculty lounge, half-formed theories about smugglers, dark creatures, and curses. But none dare speak the possibility that sits so plainly before us. None except me. The wards still have not recovered from that night. Their resonance is irregular, pulsing faintly at unpredictable intervals, as though they are bracing for another blow. My attempts to stabilize the outer layers have met resistance. Some foreign pressure pushing back, stretching the magic thinner with every passing day. It is not an active attack, but a continual strain, just enough to weaken our defenses over time. This morning's staff meeting confirmed my suspicions. Dumbledore knows far more than he says. Minerva was pale, her lips pressed tight in that way that signals worry she refuses to show the students. She asked whether the unicorn was killed by human hands. Dumbledore smiled, a soft, grandfatherly smile that soothed everyone except those who know him well. "Let us not jump to grim conclusions," he said, which, of course, means the conclusions are likely far worse. I remained after the meeting to question him, hoping that the urgency of the situation might finally pry open the vault of information he guards so fiercely. "Albus," I said, "you know what this means. Unicorns are not prey for anything except—" He raised a hand, stopping me with infuriating gentleness. "I am aware, Severus, aware." Yet he refuses to act. He insists that Quirrell is merely struggling with nerves, that the stone remains secure, that my suspicions, while appreciated, should be tempered with calm. Calm, as if calm can shield a castle against predators that drink innocence for strength. Meanwhile, Quirrell is deteriorating at an alarming pace. Today he collapsed outside the staff room, mumbling incoherently, gripping his turban as though it held his head together. His magic flickered wildly, sharp enough that even a passing student felt the sting and recoiled. When I approached, he shrank away with the desperation of someone expecting a blow. But then, just for a heartbeat, the fear vanished. His gaze locked onto mine, cold, impossible, assessing. And I saw it again. Something behind his eyes that does not belong to him. Possession is the only explanation that fits. Yet even that word feels insufficient for the force moving within him. Potter, unsurprisingly, has been watching Quirrell with renewed interest. He does not understand what he sees, but his instincts are sharp, sharper than they should be. He lingered outside the defense classroom today, longer than necessary. Confusion and suspicion written plainly across his face. He knows something is wrong, and he is getting closer to the truth in all the wrong ways. The boy is going to get himself killed. The staff grows restless, the students uneasy, and the wards tremble with warning. The castle feels like a chessboard in the final stages of a match, pieces tightening into formation, strategies converging. Dumbledore continues to play calm observer. I am forced to play watchdog, and Potter, whether he realizes it or not, is already seated on the front line. The next disturbance will not be a warning. It will be a move. April 22nd, 1992. The past week has been the most volatile the wards have endured since the school year began. 3 separate disturbances, each more deliberate than the last, have rippled through the protective layers surrounding the stone. These are no longer gentle probes or hesitant tests. Someone is focusing their efforts with surgical precision, searching for the exact point where the defenses will yield. The first disturbance occurred late Sunday evening. The wards pulsed sharply enough that I felt it from the dungeons. A sudden, concentrated pressure against the outermost barrier. When I arrived at the 3rd floor corridor, the residual magic was still warm. A strong caster, confident and practiced. The pattern, thin, constricting, parasitic, was identical to what I sensed in the forest. Quirrell, or rather, whatever manipulates him. 2 nights later came the second disturbance. This one nearly bypassed the sensory layer entirely. I traced the spell work afterward and discovered a narrow thread of magic attempting to weave through the protective lattice. It failed, but only barely. I spent hours reinforcing the compromised segment and integrating additional countermeasures, charms so intricate that even a skilled wizard would find them maddening to unravel. While I worked, I could feel the stone's aura pulsing faintly behind the walls, steady yet strained, as though aware of the danger creeping ever closer. The third disturbance came tonight. This one was the closest call of them all. I was conducting my usual patrol when the wards jolted with such force that the torches flickered. Someone had struck at the barrier, not experimentally, but with intent. The attack lasted only a few seconds before collapsing, but it was powerful enough to warp part of my challenge layer. A section of the puzzle logic, one of the traps designed to test magical reasoning, had been forcefully disrupted, like a lock picked with brute strength. I repaired it, but the damage is evident. The attacker is improving. Quirrell is not improving. His magic is erratic, flickering between extremes. I encountered him after dinner in the entrance hall. He stumbled, nearly falling, and when I moved to steady him, he recoiled violently. For a moment, his eyes darkened so deeply, so unnaturally, that I felt a chill I have not experienced in years. There is something ancient behind that man's eyes now, something that remembers me. Later in the evening, while checking the 7th floor landing, I heard faint footsteps, deliberate, cautious. Potter, and not alone. The Granger girl whispered frantically, trying to convince him to turn back. Weasley, predictably, wanted to press forward. Their movements were too close to areas they have no business exploring. They are on the trail again. Every time Potter nears the stone, the castle itself seems to tighten, as though bracing for impact. His presence draws danger the way a flame draws moths. I can no longer dismiss it as coincidence. I followed them until they turned toward the common rooms. Satisfied they were not heading for the 3rd floor, tonight, at least. If they had approached the wards during one of these fluctuations, no. I refuse to imagine what might have happened. The staff remains blissfully unaware of the mounting threat. Even Minerva has begun to relax slightly now that exams loom. Hagrid is preoccupied with a ridiculous dragon egg he claims to have won in a card game. Yet another disaster waiting to happen. Only Dumbledore seems aware, and even then, he maintains that same maddening calm, as though watching a storm he expected all along. The truth is stark. The next attempt may not be a test. It may be the final strike. And I fear we are nearly out of time. May 9th, 1992. The signs are no longer scattered, they are converging, all threads twisting toward a single, inevitable point. The castle feels different now, charged with the kind of tension that precedes calamity. Even the portraits glance toward the 3rd floor corridor more often, whispering among themselves when they think no one is listening. Hogwarts is aware. So am I. The Stones ward suffered 2 more disturbances this week. Both were subtle, brief fluctuations that would escape the notice of anyone less attuned to complex enchantments. But they were not random. The intruder is tracing the structure of the protections, isolating weak spots with methodical precision. The pauses between attempts are shortening. Whoever is behind this has nearly completed their assessment. Quirrell is crumbling. I observed him in the staff room this afternoon. His hands shook uncontrollably as he poured tea, dribbling it across the table. But then, for a fraction of a moment, the quivering stopped. His posture shifted, straightened, as though the trembling had never existed, and his expression, "Merlin, help us," transformed into something cold and deliberate. The duality has reached a breaking point. Quirrell is not simply influenced, he is occupying, and the occupying force is growing impatient. When he noticed me watching, the fear flickered back into place, the stammer returned, and he excused himself with such haste that he nearly collided with Minerva on the way out. She sighed, muttering something about nerves and overwork. I said nothing. There is no benefit in frightening the staff when they cannot grasp the nature of the threat. Then there are Potter and his friends. Their behavior has shifted from curiosity to calculation. Last night, I intercepted fragments of their conversation near the library staircase. They spoke in hushed, hurried tones, referencing the third-floor corridor with a confidence that suggests they have pieced together far more than any student should. The Granger girl seems particularly determined. Potter listens intently. Weasley follows out of loyalty and misplaced bravery. They are circling the truth, and with their new-found awareness comes heightened danger. Children with fragments of understanding are liabilities, especially when the threat hunting the stone is far more adept than they could ever imagine. Potter watches Quirrell now, not with fear, but with suspicion. He feels the wrongness, even if he cannot articulate it. His instincts are unnervingly sharp. At times, he looks far older than 11, as though the castle's secrets are speaking directly to him. It worries me. Curious children die quickly around dark magic. Tonight, the wards pulsed again, softly, like a breath drawn in anticipation. I checked the protective layers thoroughly, reinforcing the section where the last disruption occurred. The magic within the corridor feels thinner, strained, as if something has begun pulling at it from the inside. I dread what that implies. Dumbledore, infuriatingly, continues his serene routine. When I confronted him earlier about the escalation, he offered the same refrain. Trust, Severus. Trust is a fool's luxury. The truth is clear now. All parts. Potter's curiosity, Quirrell's unraveling, the stone's weakening defenses are drawing toward a single moment, a collision point, and when it arrives, it will happen swiftly. The shadow behind Quirrell is preparing its final move, and I must be ready to meet it. June 4th, 1992. I knew it. Every instinct I have honed over 2 decades told me tonight would be the night. And yet, even with all my preparation, the events unfolded more chaotically than I anticipated. The warning came the moment the wards convulsed. Not trembled, convulsed. A violent jolt that rippled through the stone's entire protective lattice, rattling the torches along the third-floor corridor and sending a shock of magic through the floors beneath my feet. I was in my office at the time, grading essays with half my attention fixed on the wards, as I have done for months. When the jolt hit, I was out of my chair before the parchment finished, sliding to the floor. And then the second blow landed, sharper, deeper, collapsing the outer sensory layer. Someone had made their move. I left immediately. The corridors blurred as I ran, Cloak whipping behind me. Students were tucked away in their common rooms, but a strange, unnatural silence settled over the castle like a shroud. The kind of silence that precedes something irreversible. Halfway to the 3rd floor, I encountered Minerva, pale and stone-faced, delivering the news I dreaded. Dumbledore had been summoned away. Convene timing. To convene knit a trap. Clearly meant to remove the only wizard Quirrell truly feared. With Dumbledore absent, the protections were vulnerable, still powerful, but lacking the stabilizing presence that strengthens them. I raced toward the restricted corridor. When I arrived, the door to Fluffy's chamber hung open. Fluffy himself was asleep, deeply, unnaturally. A harp lay on the floor beside him, strings still vibrating faintly. Someone had used music. Whoever orchestrated this had planned meticulously, studying each layer of protection with surgical precision. And then, infuriatingly, I sensed something else. Another disturbance. Smaller, faster. Weaving through the entrance chamber's residual magic, Potter had been here. Potter and his friends. Their magical traces lingered. Granger's sharp, controlled charmcraft. Weasley's clumsier, uneven bursts. Potter's strange, instinctive signature. The trio had passed through the same chambers as the intruder. I do not know whether I was angrier at their recklessness or terrified of what they would encounter. I moved quickly, where the deeper chambers had already resealed themselves. 4 layers beneath Fluffy, the entire protective structure shifted, locking down automatically once the enchantments detected an intruder passing through. That meant one thing. Someone had progressed far enough to enter the final challenge. I knew then that I would not reach them in time. I ran anyway. Each chamber was in disarray. Hermione's spellwork disabling obstacles clearly intended for far older wizards. Ron's magical bursting signatures spread recklessly across the board layout of Minerva's enchanted chess match. Scorch marks where Potter must have fought through the next rooms. Each clue raised my fury and fear in equal measure. Children should never have been allowed this far, and yet they had reached it. They had gone after the intruder themselves. By the time I reached the threshold of the final chamber, the air was thick with residual dark magic, strong enough that I felt it burning against my skin. A confrontation had taken place here, a violent one, but Potter was gone. The intruder, Quirrell, was gone. All that remained was silence. Silence and the fading echo of something ancient that pressed against my senses before slipping away, leaving only the memory of cold hunger. Minutes later, Dumbledore arrived, his absence ending as abruptly as it had begun. He brushed past me, face unreadable, as though this entire catastrophe had been an anticipated step rather than a crisis. He descended into the chamber alone. I was forced to wait. Wait in the dark, in the quiet, while the castle exhaled around me. Relief mingled with dread. The wards began stabilizing themselves slowly, painfully, like an injured creature pulling its limbs inward after an attack. Potter survived, but I did not yet know how or why. And Quirrell had crossed the final threshold. Tonight, the game piece we all feared at last revealed itself. And the one child I have sworn, however reluctantly, to protect has thrown himself into its jaws. When the castle closes its eyes tonight, it will not sleep. Neither will I. June 10th, 1992. The past several days have been consumed by a fatigue that no potion can remedy. The events of the 4th left a residue on the castle, on all of us, that is yet to settle. Hogwarts feels bruised. Its wards hum softly, like a wounded animal nursing itself back to strength, and the corridors seem to watch more closely than before, as though expecting another rupture at any moment. I understand the sentiment. I feel the same. Potter survived. That fact is both infuriating and, though I will never allow myself to admit it aloud, relieving. When I first saw him after the incident, unconscious and pale against the infirmary pillars, I felt a jolt of something sharp and unwelcome in my chest. Fear. A worthless indulgence. But there it was. Dumbledore hovered near him in a manner that suggested he had anticipated the outcome, though even he could not mask the tightness in his expression. The headmaster offered his explanation later, though explanation seems a generous word. He spoke of ancient magic, love, sacrifice, protection wrought in blood and choice. Lily, always Lily. Her name was not spoken, but it lingered between us, an uninvited ghost that has haunted me for a decade. Dumbledore insists that her sacrifice shielded the boy once more, turning Quirrell's attack back upon him. He said this lightly, almost gently, as though discussing the weather rather than a child's near death. I told him he should have been clearer from the beginning. He only smiled, softly, maddeningly, and replied that clarity can be dangerous. I left before I said something I would regret. Quirrell, for his part, is dead. Dumbledore confirmed it without ceremony. There was no body, no corpse to examine, only the lingering stench of parasitic magic evaporating into the stone. Whatever inhabited him fled or was destroyed during the encounter with Potter. I sensed its departure the moment it happened, a rip in the air, a cold exhalation that brushed past the edges of my consciousness like a shadow remembering me before slipping into nothing. It was not a human presence. It has not been human for a very long time. Potter believes I despise him. He looked at me from his infirmary bed with suspicion, confusion, and that ever-present spark of defiance. I met his gaze with the same sternness I always do. It is easier that way, for him and for me. A boy who thinks me an enemy is far less likely to look for patterns I cannot afford him to see. And yet, as I left the infirmary, I could not shake the thought that he is growing too perceptive. He will begin asking the wrong questions soon, and I have no desire to revisit the darker chapters of my life in the answers. The stone is destroyed. Dumbledore told me this, as though it were a minor administrative decision. Only he would treat the destruction of an artifact of immeasurable power with the casualness of assigning new textbooks. It is gone, he said, because it needed to be gone. I did not argue, partly because I agree, and partly because I am too exhausted for another philosophical debate over what he chooses to reveal and what he keeps locked behind those ancient blue eyes. There is a somberness to the air now, a quiet mourning, not for Quirrell, but for the truth of what nearly returned. I have seen enough darkness to recognize when it has merely retreated, not fallen. Something fled that chamber, something wounded but not defeated. Voldemort's shadow lingers, thin, patient, and searching for a new host. And Potter, as always, stands directly in the path of its interest. I do not know what the coming years will bring, but I know this. I will need to remain vigilant, for the sake of the castle, for the sake of the vow I made long ago, and for the sake of a child who is far too willing and far too destined to walk straight into the center of danger. He has Lily's courage, he has James's recklessness, and he has a future I fear will demand both. I will not let him face it unprotected, even if he never understands why. June 20th, 1992. The castle has begun to thaw from the tension of early June. Students chatter again, teachers resume their usual routines, and the atmosphere, though lighter, feels strangely hollow, as if Hogwarts itself has not yet fully recovered from what transpired. The echoes of that night linger in the stone, in the wards, in my own thoughts. Magic remembers trauma, and this school has seen more than its share. The end-of-year feast was held this evening. Ordinarily, I tolerate these events with the same patience one reserves for prolonged dental procedures. But tonight was uniquely aggravating. Dumbledore, in typical dramatic fashion, chose to append the House Cup standings at the final moment. Gryffindor, the house that has monopolized chaos all year, was awarded an absurd number of last-minute points. Potter and his accomplices were celebrated like heroes, returning from war, their misadventures repackaged as bravery. I should not be surprised. This school revels in romanticizing rule-breaking so long as a Gryffindor commits it. The hall erupted into applause. The red and gold banners unfurled overhead, and Potter sat there, wide-eyed and awestruck, drinking in the admiration like a child seeing sunlight for the first time. I watched him carefully from the staff table, not with fondness, and certainly not with pride, but with an unease I could not entirely dismiss. He has no idea what he truly confronted this year. No idea what stalked him through shadows, classrooms, and forests. No idea how close he came to death more times than he can count. And yet the boy smiled, unaware, or perhaps refusing to acknowledge, the role he played in forces far greater than himself. In the days since the stone's destruction, I have revisited the protective chambers several times. Their magic is inert now, empty husks of what they once held. Walking through them feels like wandering through a battlefield after the wounded have been taken away, quiet but charged with memory. The scorch marks remain. The echoes of spells linger faintly, and in the final chamber, the air holds a coldness that was not there before, a faint residue of something ancient that slipped away into the dark. Quirrell's absence has been discussed among the staff only in hushed tones. Most accept Dumbledore's official explanation without question. The man succumbed to injuries sustained in the chamber. It is a partial truth, technically accurate, yet disgustingly insufficient. Only a few of us understand what truly happened, or what nearly happened. The staff is safer not knowing, I suppose. Their ignorance shields them from a terror they are ill-equipped to confront. The students, meanwhile, prepare to leave for summer holiday. Hogwarts always feels wrong during these transitions. Too quiet, too exposed. Its heartbeat slowed without the constant stir of young magic. I find myself oddly relieved that Potter will be away for a time. His presence attracts storms. Perhaps the castle will have a moment to recuperate without tearing wards open to accommodate his catastrophes. I passed him in the entrance hall today as he spoke with Hagrid. He offered me a curt nod, polite, but tinged with the same mistrust he has carried all year. I returned it with the smallest incline of my head. He thinks I despise him. In some ways, that is accurate. In other ways, it is convenient. Let him hold on to that belief. Let him never suspect the truth, that my watchfulness is not anchored in hatred, but in obligation, and in the echo of a promise made beside a dying woman. The school year ends tomorrow. The castle will sleep, but I will not be lulled into complacency. The threat we faced has not been vanquished, only delayed. Voldemort's shade slipped away, seeking new refuge, new means of returning. He is weakened, yes, but persistence is one of his few virtues. He will rise again, and when he does, Potter will once more stand directly in his path. The boy will need protection, layers of it. Protection he neither accepts nor understands. I will be ready, whether he knows it or not. For now, I will savor the quiet while it lasts. It will not last long. July 1st, 1992. The students departed yesterday, leaving the castle hollow and vast in their absence. The summer hush has settled over Hogwarts, a quiet so complete it almost feels unnatural after the chaos of this year. Without the constant thrum of young magic, the halls seem older, colder, more aware of their own memories. I know the feeling well. I walked the grounds this morning, partly out of habit, partly to ensure that the last traces of disturbance had faded. The wards have finally stabilized. Their resonance is steady again, humming with a familiar vigilance rather than strained desperation. For the first time in months, the magic of the castle feels whole. It is a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. Potter has returned to the Muggle world. Dumbledore insists that he is safest there for now, far from the wizarding eyes that would try to pull him into conflicts he is not yet ready to face. Perhaps he is right, but I cannot shake the unease that grips me whenever I consider where the boy must spend his summers. Lily would never have chosen that place for him. The thought sits poorly with me. Before he left, Potter glanced back at the castle as though reluctant to go, unaware that unseen eyes were still watching him from above. He has no idea how close he came to dying this year. No idea what stalked him. No idea what shadow slipped inches from claiming him in that final chamber. And no idea that the protections keeping him alive extend far beyond ancient magic and a mother's sacrifice. I watched him leave, and I felt something unfamiliar, an ache, deep and silent. It passed quickly, dismissed with the practiced ease of someone long accustomed to burying emotion. But it was there. This diary, these entries, have been my only outlet for thoughts that cannot be spoken, not even to Dumbledore, especially not to him. I have sealed the volume with layered enchantments. Should anyone attempt to read it, the pages will restructure themselves into meaningless alchemical notes. That is for the best. If discovered, these writings could raise questions best left unasked. Quirrell's death still weighs on me more heavily than I anticipated. Not because of the man. He was weak, foolish, and ultimately disposable, but because of the force that occupied him. I recognized the hunger in that magic, the cold calculation that lingered after it fled. Voldemort is not merely alive. He is searching, drifting, waiting for an opportunity to anchor himself once more, and he will find one. When he does, the boy will be there again. The world will trumpet him as a savior, but the truth is simpler and more brutal. Harry Potter is a child being steered toward battles he cannot begin to comprehend. I will not glorify him. I will not indulge him. I will not allow him to grow complacent or arrogant, but I will protect him for Lily, for the promise made in a room soaked in green light, for the future neither of us asked for. The storm has passed for now, But the clouds have not dispersed. They have merely drifted to the horizon. Another year will come, another threat with it. When it arrives, I will be ready. This diary ends here, for this term at least. I leave it sealed in my private cabinet, buried beneath centuries of dust and disguise. The castle sleeps. Soon, so will I. But not for long.